dignitaries to come and take their chairs at the stage in no particular order, starting from my left. May I invite Dr. Muhammad Nadeem Javed Saab to come and take his chair on the podium. He's not here. Dr. Niaz Ahmad Bhutto Saab, could you please come? Big round of applause. Dr. Ishrat Hussain, the chief guest for today, sir, could you please come and join us? Professor Dr. Sayyid Mir Muhammad Shah, if he is here, please come and join us. Professor Dr. Zahur Hassan Saab, Zahur Saab, could you please come and join us? Professor Dr. Niaz Hussain Gumro Saab, the head of department, could you please come and join us?
In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, honorable chief guest, distinguished dignitaries, esteemed patrons of the conference, respected conveners, glorious keynote speakers, panelists, valued guests, ICBEM 2024 participants, esteemed faculty members, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning to all of you. This is Dr. Ummi Salma Akbar, Assistant Professor at Sukkur University with my esteemed colleague.
Kazmi, the Assistant Professor for Management and Entrepreneurship.
Together it's honor and privilege to welcome you all to 5th International Conference on Business, Economics and Management ICBEM 2024, hosted by prestigious Sukkur University.
Thank you. As we gather here today, we stand on the shoulders of those who have paved the way for excellence in education, research, and leadership. Following the tradition, we begin our proceedings in the name of Allah, the most merciful and the beneficent. I would like to invite Professor Dr. Khalid Shafi Saab to grace us with the recitation of a few verses from the Holy Quran. Khalid Saab.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله ऐ ईमान वालों, जब आज़ान हो जुमे की नमाज के लिए, बस जल्दी करो अल्लाह की याद के लिए और छोड़ दो कारोबारी ज़िंदगी। ये बेहतर है तुम्हारे हक में अगर तुम जानते हो। और जब नमाज मुकम्मल कर लो तो फिर फैल जाओ ज़मीन में और तलाश करो अल्लाह के फजल में से, और अल्लाह को कसरत से याद करो ताकि तुम फलाह पा जाओ। और जब ये देखते हैं तिजारत और खेल तमाशा तो छोड़ देते हैं आपको तन्हा खड़े। आप इनको बता दीजिए कि जो कुछ अल्लाह के पास है वो बेहतर है उस खेल तमाशे और तिजारत से, और अल्लाह बेहतरीन रिस्क देने वाला है। सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम।
Jazakallah.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's formally start the session. The first keynote speaker for today is a distinguished figure in Pakistani governance and academia, recently served as the advisor to the on institutional reforms and austerity, a very decorated figure in Pakistan, enduring contribution to governance, economic development, and academia. He solidified his status as the prominent figure in Pakistan's public policy landscape. Please give a big round of applause to our first keynote speaker, Dr. Ishrat Hussain Saab.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished delegates, faculty members, dear students, it's always a great pleasure to be back in IBA Sukkur. I've been coming here regularly for the last so many years and have seen the great achievements and the progress which this institution has made, and I hope that it continue to do so. I also want to congratulate them on the new accreditation by AACST, which is a great achievement for a public sector university, and I hope this is the beginning of a new journey which the IBA Sukkur faculty and the students will embark to improve the quality of the instruction much further. Since my retirement from the government in 2018, I've been going around the country, right from Gilgit, Baltistan, all the way to Balochistan, Gwadar, various universities, many business organizations, the government officials, lecturing them, also interacting with the intellectuals and public thought leaders. And I have come to the conclusion that there is a disconnect between what the industry is requiring for their workforce and what our academic institutions are producing. And let me give you some numbers. And these are general numbers. These are not just the business graduates. So my topic is for the business graduates, but you have to place them in the context of overall education system of Pakistan. In a survey, 92% of the HR managers responded that the students we are employing today are not equipped for role-specific technical skills. 78% are not possessing digital skills, and 71% of them lack communication skills. When we surveyed the students, they found that the pedagogical tools and the assessment system place a lot of emphasis on completing the curriculum and getting the grades and getting the certification or the degree and the credentials. Not much on the acquisition, assimilation, and retention of either the content, the knowledge, or any exposure to the real world problems. So this is a disconnect. And I'm quite concerned because we are living in a very uncertain world, both globally as well as nationally. And this uncertainty is not going to disappear. So my entire focus today is what the students should be doing, what the faculty members should be doing, what the accreditation agencies and HEC regulators should be doing, and what should be the government doing in order to enhance the employability of our students, particularly in the business schools. And let me begin with just recounting on the bullet points as to what are the global mega trends. The global mega trends is that unlike the 90s and 2000s up to 2020, globalization is on a receding path. Those countries who benefited from globalization are no longer going to benefit because there is a movement towards national protectionism away from global integration. So the benefits of globalization are no longer going to be available as we speak in the next. And this has started with Trump in 2016, and this started with the anti-immigration lobbies and the parties who have come into power in Europe. And the first example I can give you is the Italian Prime Minister, who is a very die-hard anti. And in France, you may have Le Pen, who she is also opposed to this integration with the rest of the world, and Trump perhaps is likely to become the president again in the US, and the US used to be the leader for globalization. So we have to see that the environment internationally is not going to be very conducive for us, and for you, not for us, but for you. Second, we have a big challenge of the climate change, environment and pollution. And you have already seen that in case of Pakistan. We had devastating floods which caused losses of lives, property, and economic loss of $32 billion. Now if you read the newspapers, the glaciers in Karakoram Range today are without snow. That means that you wouldn't be able to get the waters in the Indus during the Rabi cropping season. You will not have the hydropower generation possibilities because of the lack of water. So this will have an adverse effect on your food availability, on your water availability, and your energy availability. The third megatrend is that we are moving in technology in direction which we do not know. There's a lot of debate about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And there are people who say ChatGPT is something which we should try to use for the improvement of the living standards and efficiency. There are others who say this may be an unwritten devastation for the human being because the students will not apply their minds and will plagiarize and cheat on their essays and their learning by using the ChatGPT. So that is a threat. While technology is to be utilized, and in my view, it should be utilized as AI tutor, it should be utilized for agri-tech, it used to be for fintech, and it used to be for telehealth. It will be a positive, movement and utilization of AI. But I don't know whether this is going to happen this way or that. The fourth trend is the demographic changes. If you look at countries like Japan and Korea, and soon Germany, the population growth is negative. And they are now looking for workforce outside their borders. Japan and Korea used to be ethnically pure countries, which never welcomed foreign workers. But now they have opened up their borders. While countries like Pakistan have a huge bulge. So if we are able to train and equip these people, our young people like you, with the kind of skills which are required by these countries, we can ease the problem of employability in the country, but also supply to the labor force of these aging countries. And finally, we have a problem of geopolitics because the US is losing its hegemony, which it acquired after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and China now has become a major power. So there is a tussle between the US and China, and Pakistan is also going to be affected by that. There are many other trends, but I just wanted you to think about these trends because they're going to affect you. We had our lives, but this is now for the younger generation. Nationally, we have more political polarization today, and we have more tensions between the political parties who are not coming together and sitting around the table to find the solutions to the socio-economic problems that this country is facing. Whether this is going to improve or not, I'm not sure. But we have to recognize that this is going to be a source of uncertainty for the decision making, but we have to go ahead and do our own jobs despite this uncertainty. So what do we do about it? The word is no longer career. That word has become redundant. The word today is employability. And employability means that you have to keep on upskilling, reskilling yourself throughout your life. Why is it so? The jobs which existed 10 years ago are vanishing very rapidly. And the new jobs which are going to be created 10 years from now. So how do you train yourself for the jobs whose content, whose contours, whose specifications you're not even aware of? So it is less on the acquisition of knowledge, because knowledge keeps on changing and updating, but it is on the acquisition of the skill. So this race among all of you
कि मेरा GPA है 3.5 आ जाए, मैं ऐसे सब्जेक्ट ले लूँ जिसमें मैं जल्दी से पास हो जाऊँ, मैं जो है ये सिलेक्टेड क्वेश्चंस कर लूँ, जो टीचर ने नोट्स पढ़ाए हैं उसको इम्तहान में रिप्रोड्यूस कर दूँ. You're doing great disservice to yourself. Because what will actually attract you to the employer is, are you able to contribute to the bottom line of that company? They're not interested in your GPAs. And what do they require for this? There are 3 set of skills which they require. And this is from the surveys. This is not my own, makeup. 1, your technical and functional skills. If you're a finance major, are you able to get into computational finance or not? Because that is what is going to drive the financial discipline in the future. Are you able to use big data and data analytics for solving the problems faced by the employers? If you're marketing, are you good enough on the digital marketing? You don't have now to write the copies for your advertising company. They are now prompt managers who give the prompt, and ChatGPT can produce the copy, so you don't need the skills of the copy. If you are in the field of HR, it is just not recruitment, retention, but also to make sure that there is a continuous learning throughout the tenure of that individual, and distinguish between those who are potential for future jobs and those who can be actually brought to become a useful part of the organization. So it's a differentiated approach in the HR. It is not the same processes and same procedures. What are the social skills? The social skill is that you must know how to work together as a team and collaborate. I used to tell my graduating students at IBA, it doesn't matter if you are 4.0, but your attitude is that, and you look down upon all your colleagues, इन्होंने तो मुझसे कम ग्रेड लिए हैं, ये क्या चीज है? The world today, the company doesn't care. They want the team to produce results. And if you're unable to take your team together and produce results, you are of no use to the company. You should be able to communicate both orally as well as in writing. I set up a center for writing so that my students were able to write cogently and clearly because they were not able to express themselves. And that is one of the problems, both oral as well, writing and make presentations, which are focused to convince, to pitch to the, venture capital funds, to the investors. That is the name of the game. Adaptability. You cannot become rigid. You have to keep up adapting yourself to the new circumstances. You have to be creative. You cannot accept on the face value what your teacher has given you in the notes or has given the books. There's no longer valid. You have to challenge it. And you have to be convinced that this is really the right approach for the problem. You have to be curious. That means the best way is asking questions. हमारे तो बचपन से माँ बाप कहते हैं चुप करो, क्या बकवास कर रहे हो, सवाल कोई पूछता है उसको डिस्करेज करते हैं, That's the best way of learning. टीचर्स को मैंने देखा, वो टीचर्स कहते हैं अच्छा तुम हमें चैलेंज कर रहे हो, हम तुम्हें देख लेंगे. So बच्चे सहम के बैठ जाते, they never ask any questions. That is not how the skills will be formed. You have to be curious, you have to be creative, you have to be analytical in your thinking, not memorizing, not rectifying. That is not required. You have to have a critical thinking. These are the social skills you need. Then you have digital skills. हम कहते हैं जी एक्सेल मुझे आता है, मैं पावर पॉइंट भी कर सकता हूँ, मैं वर्ड प्रोसेसिंग भी कर सकता हूँ, मैं ईमेल भी भेज सकता हूँ और अपने पास व्हाट्सएप भी है. You use technology in order to bring about efficiency and cost effectiveness in whatever your professional job is. That is what technology and the digital skills are. It is not simply knowing the tools. पहले हम पेंसिल से लिखते थे, फिर हमारे पास कैलकुलेटर आ गया, अब कंप्यूटर आ गया. These are tools. इससे आप फायदा क्या उठाते हैं for the work you are doing? Those are important things. Now for the teachers, you have to have a different mode of the pedagogical tools. You have a flipped class. Give the students problems, assignments, and then bring them to the class for discussing them, for finding solutions to those problems. And this can be done today because everything is wired. So you can have all the assignments given individually to the students, and when they come back, they are prepared. And you assess them over time on the basis of their understanding of the material, on their contribution, on their creativity and their ingenuity. Not कि midterm में इसके इतने आए थे और फाइनल में इसके इतने आ गए हैं, ये मिला के हम इसको इतने नंबर दे देंगे. That is not what is required of the faculty. And the faculty doesn't go by textbooks. Even what I published, 3 years or 4 years ago, most of the material or doing research or doing case studies. So when they come to the class and they share their latest knowledge, the students are highly excited. The teachers who are working in the industry and who are visiting faculty members were more popular among my students as compared to the young faculty members who had just come back to their PhDs because their knowledge was theoretical. But these were hands-on practical knowledge, which the students really enjoy. So how can you become useful? You have exponential learning, which we introduced in IBA. In the 4th year, all the students are assigned to the companies, and the faculty member is working with them, along with a supervisor from the company. And they solve the real-world problem. That they become useful. Because the company is observing them for 1 year, and they know who is useful for them. And even before they graduate, their job offers for them if they're good. If they're useless, they are not giving any jobs. Half an hour interview, but HEC and accreditation, the entire incentive structure is distorted. I did my PhD long time ago. I cannot read many of the peer-reviewed journals today, and they are becoming so narrow and so specialized that perhaps only few individuals can read them. But your promotion is based on the peer-reviewed journals. But if you are in IBA Sukkur and you have contributed to improving the management practices of the company whose contribution has gone up, you're not recognized. So the incentive structure has to shift from these peer-reviewed journals to the contribution to the real-world problems. And finally, for the government has, and that starts not only at the level of the universities and the business schools, but from the primary school level. You have to start with the science and mathematics. The world is moving in that direction. All of you will have in order to do your routine work. So the foundation has to be 3% of GDP on R&D, and we require so much of research and development in this country. I did a study, Prime Minister asked me to look at Pakistan agriculture research system. 95% of the budget goes into the salaries. Where would they do any experiments? Where would they find time to get equipment or the money? Then you should encourage Pakistani diaspora. India has done that very well. To collaborate with the Pakistani universities in the fields of education, health, and agriculture. But our teachers have to be broad-minded. We think that these teachers who are coming or researchers who are coming, there's a threat to them. That's not true. When I was a student in this university, we used to get Fulbright scholars. But our teachers were very secure because they themselves had done PhDs from Imperial College and King's College and Oxford and others. But now the teachers are insecure. So anybody who's coming from abroad, they're resistant. You have to be broad-minded in order to improve the quality of your education. Third, you send Pakistani scholars and researchers on sabbatical, on scholarships to top universities and academically, advanced countries. हम अब मलेशिया भेज रहे हैं, China भेज रहे हैं, no. But still you have the best universities and research institutes in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Germany, in Australia, and Canada. They cannot be matched. US में भी हम जाते हैं Fulbright पे, तो हम second rate, third rate universities में भेजते हैं अपने scholars को. That is not what will take us. Then fourth, upgrade the science laboratories in colleges and universities. I started my education in chemistry, and in Sindh University we had the latest equipment, all the reagents. अभी मुझे एक यूनिवर्सिटी में जाने का मौका मिला, क्योंकि मैं केमिस्ट्री का, मैंने कहा मुझे लैब दिखाओ. वो कहते थे reagents ही नहीं हमारे पास. Now how can you become a good scientist if you haven't done? Then, related to the STEM subjects, there's a shortage of science and math teachers all over Pakistan. And we're not producing science graduates from our universities, especially the females. And the females are much more committed and serious teachers. So I would say you give scholarships for doing these courses which can allow them to become teachers. Then grant liberal scholarships to talented students to go to the best universities and PhDs. Most of the engineering and math universities, top universities, math departments. Who are doing PhDs? Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Indians, Vietnamese. We can hardly find any Pakistanis in these top universities departments. We have set up science parks, science museums that encourage interaction between the younger students and the objects of their philosophy. I went to the Dowd Museum and saw young students playing around and understanding the concepts of physics and biology, greater ease. And math, and they were very happy doing that. If we replicate that, then we will be having some. Then we have to promote technical and vocational training. We can't have 31% of our graduates unemployed. While in technical and vocational training, we can only have 1% of our enrollment. While there is a demand in the Middle East, the DEFCON Institute, which is run by a friend of mine, Mr. Razak Dawud, has produced 35,000 technical persons, and most of them have gone and got jobs in the Middle East, fetching very lucrative, remuneration, and some of them are in Pakistan. And provide incentives to the industry to set up apprenticeship schemes for young graduates. Because if you go to Germany, they have a very strong apprenticeship program. So what I've outlined is something which is going to enhance your employability in the future. Otherwise, if we continue business as usual, then I don't think you would be able to find yourself employed. So it is a joint effort of the students, of the faculty, of the HEC and accreditation agencies, and the government. It is a hard work, it is a task which has not been done so far, but it's better to begin somehow rather than wait for the time when we will find that our standards of living are going down. Thank you very much. I hope that you have a successful conference. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this moment of time, we are heading towards the keynote speech by Professor Dr. Nadeem Javed on structural transformation and inclusive growth in Pakistan, directions for the reform. Dr. Javed is an eminent figure in economics and strategy. He serves as the professor at Karachi School of the Business and Leadership, KSBL, with a marvelous contribution to Pakistan economic affairs. Dr. Javed earned Sitara Imtiaz in 2023. Over to you, sir.
Assalamualaikum. The Dr. Ishrat has pointed out most of the things at the micro level when it comes to human development index and human capital formation in the country. So building on that, most of the aspects which have been highlighted right now are quite reflective in the numbers when we look at the macro economy of Pakistan. So in that context, to look at how the structural transformation is hampered and causing a lot of problems when it comes to inclusive growth in Pakistan, I will give you an overview of the structural challenges which we are facing in terms of the Pakistan economy. Then I'm going to quickly lead you through the growth analysis from 1960 to 23 by highlighting some key stabilized aspects. then the growth trajectory, what are the options for Pakistan in the years to come or days to come? If we follow the business as usual, then where we would be, and if we are going to follow a kind of a transformational path, then what could be our destination down the road in 5 to 10 years? So, and if we want to really have that kind of growth, which is the outcome of transformational, you could say that activities, then what would be the direction for reforms to achieve that? So that's the kind of sequence I will follow presentation. So here, if you look at that, this is where is the sectoral overview of the GDP contribution. And unfortunately, since last many years, it is stagnant like this. I mean, there is a slight change in few percentage points, but yet we are driving around 22.35% GDP from agriculture, 20.42% from industry, and then 52.19% from services. So here, the first very important problem is like there is this premature deindustrialization that is happening in the country. And as it has been identified by Donald Roderick in his seminal work, which highlights for different economies. But what is the reason in Pakistan? I will talk about that normally. But other very important aspect to look at is that how this growth is then being generated in each sector, particularly when it comes to the labor contribution. So again, there is a serious problem that though from a few decades, if you compare the GDP from the agriculture, it has reduced and the services sector contribution has increased. But yet the labor contribution within these sectors are almost stagnant. So normally what happens when the agricultural contribution decreases, it's not decreases in absolute terms. Rather, it decreases. Why? Because the labor contribution goes down, because you are liberating the labor, which is then going to be used for other productive activities in the economic system. And this link is missing in Pakistan to a large extent. And moreover, what had happened that we had this deindustrialization, that once there was a time that industry was contributing around 23% to GDP, then it reduces to 21%, and then it is now 20.42%. And unfortunately, again, one qualitative aspect that is there, that the natural resource extraction is also that falls in the industry. But most of the time, it is the man-made products which matters. And in that category, we are, day by day, we are decreasing when it comes to this component's contribution in the GDP. And here lies this problem, this is what is called as the middle income trap. There is a very recent strand of literature that highlights that when the income and wages increases in certain economic system, and you are no more than competitive in international market because the wages have increased much quickly as compared to the kind of economic activities you are performing in that economic system. So now, I agree that some of you would be thinking that wages are not increasing at the rate those should be, keeping in view the inflation in the country. But the problem is what Dr. Ishwar has very, appropriately highlighted, and that is if your one worker productivity is equivalent to 0.3 workers of any, Korean or Chinese or any other Vietnamese worker, then there is a problem. And I will show you in the subsequent slides that how value added per industrial worker in Pakistan is so low. So this is the kind of underlying problem which is causing the serious problem when it comes to having this transition from agrarian-based economic system to industrial production. So then another problem is that with these sectoral contributions and the labor involvement, unfortunately the sector which is already having serious problems and because of the low productivity of the workers is highly taxed. Like for example, if you look at the total revenue collection in Pakistan, 41.7% revenue is from this 20% activity in the country. So then rest of the, 80% activity is not as much taxed in a way as industry is taxed. So then what is happening that most of the workers who are working in the industry, they are also, when it comes to paying their income taxes, they are on the forefront. But those who are working in the services, they are able to, sometimes conceal or dodge the taxation authorities, does not report their proper income. They are not taxed that way. That mostly, look at the lawyers, the medical doctors, dentists, and so many, engineers. So these are who are working in, self-proprietary businesses or, in individual capacity. Sometimes they are not paying their taxes as they should. And regarding agriculture, all of us know there was the problem. And both of these two activities, and another serious problem is that both of these two activities, which contribute to 80%, their taxation is the provincial responsibility. And then it further complicates the problem when it comes to the structural transformation in the economic system. So going forward, if you look at this is what is the economic growth trajectory of last 4 years, rather including the targets for 23-24, that is 3.5% from the negative 3% growth which the country had because of the floods and so many other problems. Those were prevailing because of the political uncertainty and stability in the economic system. So, if you look at the last 4 regimes in Pakistan, so then the average growth of this period is 4%. And even if you go beyond that, 2013 beyond, so then this is the kind of the political economy of growth in Pakistan, and to a large extent it is misconception that whenever we have dictatorship in the country, so then we have higher economic growth. But again, if you look into the structural aspects, sometimes it is because of the those good policies which have been opted by the democratic regimes, but eventually they were not allowed to be continued. And then another aspect is that whenever there is a dictatorship, then there is a, very impressive inflow of dollars due to, multiple reasons which, due to the paucity of time, I won't like to develop on. But this political economy, which is showing that we have these alternate periods of democracy and dictatorship, having a lot of instability and political uncertainty in the economic system. Yet, the positive thing is that the average economic growth rate is 5%. And if you use it as a rough proxy, so then if the country is not doing anything, nothing good and nothing bad, so then the economic system will give you 5%. But what is the problem? The problem is if you look at the last 13, 14 years, the average growth rate is 4%. But if you go, look at the long run, our growth potential was 5%. And this is what is a serious problem because it shows that our long-term trend for economic growth is decreasing with the passage of time. So, and this is because of, most of you who are the, economics graduates or studying economics, they understand this terminology. There's this total factor productivity. There's the combination of labor and capital productivity, but besides that is the trust in the economic system. It is the kind of, when it comes to looking at the productivity of at the firm level, this is the team dynamics at the firm level, then the kind of trust those employees enjoy vis-a-vis the employer, vis-a-vis the different employees within that organization, and so many other things on which the business schools work to improve the productivity dynamics of the firms. But unfortunately, if you apply the same framework at the national level, you could see that what is happening in most of our public sector institutions, the politics, organizational politics is at the rampant and ruthless level. Nobody is paying attention to their work. And besides the very important fact which has been highlighted by Dr. Ishwar, the skill gaps which are there are also causing this manifestation, or which shows that our long-term potential to grow is decreasing with the passage of time. And that is, I think, the most important structural challenge which we need to fix in this country. And if you compare the same trend in our other comparator countries, in India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, so their trend lines are quite positive. And you could see that, again, we are the only one in the region over where we have this tendency. Going forward, as I said, that Pakistan's, if you compare value added per industrial worker with 1990s to 2020s, so there is a slight increase. It has increased from 1 to 1.3. But in all the three other economies, Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka, there is a 3 times, that means 300% increase in their industrial value added power. So this is again the manifestation of the very same aspect you have highlighted at the micro level. So another serious problem is that, keeping in view all the previous discussion, that for this year's budget, when we were working on this in the Planning Commission and Finance Ministry, so the target for revenue was set around 12,000 billion rupees or 12 trillion. And after following the NFC award, giving roughly around 5,276 billion rupees to provinces, the federal government is only going to left with 6,887 billion rupees. And then on the other side, you could see that to run the machine in this economic system, only for the debt servicing, you require more than 7 trillion rupees. So what is left with the federal government is not sufficient even to service the debt. And this tax which I am showing you is being extracted from each and every activity through which the federal government can. But of course, the services sector, as I shown you in the previous slide, as well as most of the agriculture and most of the services sector activities are not within the ambit of the federal government. So these are the responsibilities of the provincial governments. And then the taxes over there, just to give you an example, that from the wholesale retail trade, the government collected only 2.8 billion rupees. As compared to that, the service, those who are the salaried class in this country, they have paid 288 billion rupees. So that's the kind of anomalies and the structural challenges which the economy is facing. So because of this, then government is not left with any money in the kitty to finance the development and take care of the defense needs of the country. So then eventually you will have to borrow for it, and then the borrowing is also very to an unsustainable level. Like this year, it is being expected that the budget deficit would be around 7.3, 7.4% of the GDP, as compared to what it was finalized around 6.4% at the time of the budget formation. Then the next similar paradox we have is in our external sector. Our foreign exchange earnings are roughly around $56.27 billion. But when it comes to import bill, it is for the data for the 22-23, not for the ongoing year. So then the import bill was $82.28 billion. So then eventually, after, even we are not able to take care of our import bill by having our FX earnings. So then eventually for the rest of other, this gap and some of the other activities to finance particularly such kind of development, or where some of the capex are needed in dollar terms, you will have to borrow from them. And this is another serious challenge, but it is linked with the previous paradox that whenever we have our fiscal deficit to that level, so eventually it is going to have its implications for the current account. And we are in this quagmire every time we have higher growth, then we land into this problem. So then another structural challenge that if even we want to have higher growth, we cannot finance it because of these structural challenges and constraints which we are facing in the economic system. So now, because of these two, interlinked challenges, then their manifestation is being reflected in our total debt liabilities. So, a very recent report by Barclay highlights that our debt to GDP ratio has increased by 1.4 times, while in absolute terms the debt has increased 1.9 times if you compare the last decade and a half. This is a very alarming situation, and unfortunately, if you compare this, then in import bill we are importing roughly $960 million worth of pulses, $3 billion worth of edible oil, and similarly over $900 million worth of tea and coffee. So these are the kind of things which could be easily, apart from coffee, the rest of all other things could be produced at home. Or you need to increase your capacity to earn more dollars if we want to have the same living standard in the economic system. So the similar problems are again when it comes to the borrowing. So we are borrowing even to keep our public sector enterprises alive. So roughly you could see that their operational expense, borrowing for their operational expense and for their capex is roughly around $11 billion during the last few years. And that this is a serious kind of a constraint. So neither we are able to privatize them, nor we are able to properly corporatize them. Every time there are attempts, but due to this political uncertainty and instability, no serious efforts have been made to get rid of this structural challenge as well. So when it comes to the social indicators, so here is the total population is now roughly around 242 million. Labor force participation is 32.3%. Unemployment rate, which is very, concealed one because it's camouflage. If you include the partially employed workers and discouraged worker effect, so then the unemployment rate is around 15% in this system. So the literacy rate is 58%, and expenditure on education and health is much below the target which we have agreed in the UN Charter. And this is the kind of, again, one of the reasons which is causing these manifestations, which has been highlighted by Dr. Ishrar and which are being further reinforced by these macro numbers at the national level. So here is another very important aspect to look at, that when we look at the multidimensional poverty index in Pakistan, which is being calculated by encompassing the health, education and access to sanitation indicators. So then this is the kind of heat map for Pakistan, which shows that for the green part is the only part where our the score is as per the desired level. But the rest of all other yellow and then the red areas, dark red areas are the most critical one, which shows that that the multidimensional poverty in this country is around 40%, which is very high. And that is, if you convert this number that in terms of dollar terms, it is equivalent to $3.6 per day if you're not earning, then you cannot then surpass that threshold, or where in terms of MPI, you could be considered as that you are above the poverty threshold. So in this index, the more serious anomaly or problem is that we have 20 districts which are the poorest among the other districts which we have in Pakistan. And the anomaly is like the best district of Balochistan is Awaran. And then the worst district of Punjab is Rajanpur. And unfortunately, the Awaran score is even less than Rajanpur, which is the worst district of Punjab. So these kind of inequalities and you could say anomalies are further causing a problem for the social fabric and when it comes to the cohesion at the national level among the different units of the federation, that is kind of a serious concern. So if you look at the Pakistan's growth trajectory in absolute terms, so this is how we have from $54 billion economy in 1960s to we have reached this 374.66, but then because of the floods last year we had roughly $32 billion worth of damages and losses, and then there was a kind of contraction in the size. So having this trajectory and then comparing it with a few days back, I think on 6-7 days ago, there was a lot of noise on the Twitter and all other social media. Then the Tata Group market capitalization has surpassed the total GDP size of Pakistan. So that's a kind of serious question to ponder over as an intelligentsia, as faculty members, that where we are headed. So keeping in view this, that what are the options for Pakistan? So in my last Strategic Planning Commission, we carried out this exercise that what would be our fate or destiny if we compare ourselves today with 2035, where Pakistan would be. I mean, if you have to have a long-range view of the Pakistan, so then that's the kind of situation. Those graphs which I have shown you, and then the proxies I have shown you, on that basis, the business as usual will take us to $573 billion economy in 2035. But when it comes to the transformational part, then there is a possibility that we could be $1 trillion economy. Okay, but eventually, for transformational part, eventually you will have to follow the same trajectory which has been followed by the very recent newly industrialized economies, and that is what that first you try to fix some of your problems by fixing the policy aspect. That's the kind of picking up phase. Then you get into this factor-driven and the efficiency phase, and then the last one, that's the innovation and technology driven phase. So this is the kind of trajectory, and there's no royal road to have the higher economic growth in the economic system. But for following this trajectory, that's the green curve that is highlighted in this graph. What we need to do, I will show you in the subsequent slide. But if you look at the key numbers, even then there is this paradoxical situation. And that is that in the business as usual, we are going to have this 4% average growth. But for the last 2035, we are going to have 4%, but the average growth would be 3.5%. Because the trend is decreasing, it will continue to decrease. But on the transformational part, there is a possibility that we are going to end up at 6.2% economic growth in the last year, and an average growth would be around 7.8%. Sorry, it's opposite. So, and then the unemployment would be around 5%. Exports would be 127 billion as compared to 51 billion on the business as usual case. But unfortunately, our imports would be $200 billion at the time as compared to 109 in business as usual. Because there is an import to export elasticity. And you cannot get rid of in this short horizon. There is a possibility to get rid of over the long period, 15 to 20 years, but not less than this, what the international research also shows. So this shows that even if we are going to follow the transformational path, if we are not going to fix our foreign exchange earnings by improving the FDI inflows or by further increasing our workers' remittances, it's less likely that we can get rid of current account problem even by having the transformational path. So then the poverty headcount would be around 15%. That's the kind of positive news. But in business as usual, we are going to end up having 40% poverty in our economic system. So then let's have another very important aspect to look at. So all the calculations we were having in planning commission up till now, the population growth rate was being used 1.9%. Okay, but suddenly, with having this new census of population, we came to know that our population growth is 2.6%. So which means by 2035, we are going to add 340, we are going to be 340 million as compared to 284 million if we use the 1.9% growth rate. Which means if we are not going to contain this population growth, so we are going to add up 2 South Koreas into Pakistan within the next 10 years. So that's a serious challenge. And if it is, so then inclusive growth is not possible. Because no country in the world has experienced inclusive growth with this much population. Because all the addition into the income will be only sufficient to take care of the addition into population, and there would be no improvement in the living standards in the economic system. So, besides, to cater this much growth in population, you need to have 2.5 lakh primary schools, and you could now calculate that every year how many new schools would be required. So then, increase the number of judges by more than 1,000. Similarly, the new police stations, more than 1,000 police stations every year. Then, if you look at the investments level, the current investment level is 13.6%. You will have to take it to 22% just to keep the living standards as it is as they are. So that's a serious concern. So now, how it is possible to then follow this transformational path? So a few studies which we carried out in the Planning Commission, which shows that there is a possibility over the period of 5 to 7 years, by fixing the productivity, which is a serious challenge in this country, which I have built the case for that, and also the skill gap, and then what the universities are offering in terms of skills, that is manifested in these numbers that shows that 6.4% jump we can give to our GDP within this next time, 5 to 7 years, by improving our energy sector. The kind of losses and technical losses and thefts and so many, and then conservation and efficiency. Like if we are only going to close our shopping malls at 7 p.m. in the evening, there is a possibility that we can save every year $1.4 billion in terms of import bill of the energy. So similarly, there is a possibility to improve the GDP by improving the crop losses by 50%. It is going to increase roughly around 4% jump to GDP. Improved transport sector would give 5% increase to GDP. Restructuring of the public sector enterprises roughly around 2%. Reduction in environmental degradation by fixing some of just to have the early warning systems somewhere, and just by adding resilience to the our infrastructure, there is a possibility to have 6% economic growth from this aspect. So by improving the judicial disposition of cases by 50%, there could be a possibility to have 1% additional GDP. So if you add up all these numbers, it is roughly around 24%. So just don't take 24, just take 21. Then divide it by 7 years, you are going to have 3%. So if you add up this 3% into our long-term potential of 4 to 5%, we can easily arrive on the 7% economic growth. But for that, you need to fix the economic discipline. You need to productivity along these lines, which I have mentioned, and we can arrive on this transformational path. So let me conclude this: that the potential is there, will and stability is required to unleash it, and we all have to play our role. Thank you for your attention.
To honor our guests, this is souvenirs and the shield. May I invite Professor Dr. Ridwan Shah to come at the front of the stage. Along with him, may I request Sayyid Darul Hasan to join Sabi Muhammad Shah in handing over. May I invite our first keynote speaker, Dr. Ishasab, to come forward and receive the gift. May I now invite Professor Dr. Nadeem Javed Sahab to come and receive the shield and the Advocate of Sukkur. Now, we'll be moving on to our second session for today. That will be the panel discussion. But we will need 5 minutes so that our team can do the arrangements. Can I invite our guests on the stage to take chairs down in the auditorium so that we can change the setting up on the stage?
हेलो हेलो। हाँ ये आ रहा है, आ रहा है ये, इससे पहले वाला आ रहा था। दूसरा माइक है। हेलो हेलो हेलो।
The students are requested to be seated, please. Maintain the decorum. All the students are requested to be seated, please. We are about to start our second day panel discussion. And a short time after the small press release, which is going live now, we request your silence so that the press can get a proper reviews from the delegates. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll be starting in a minute. Caroline, who is connected online with us, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, brilliant.
Professor Dr. Zahoor Hassan is the Professor Emeritus at the LUMS Lahore. He secured MS and PhD degree from the Stanford University, USA. Dr. Hassan is affiliated with LUMS since 1987. Served in the several leadership positions, he remained Vice Chancellor of LUMS for 2 terms. The remarkable milestone covered by Dr. Hassan include the National Outreach Program, where students from underprivileged areas could study at the LUMS.
All right, our first panelist for today, it was the first keynote speaker. In your big round of applause, may I invite Dr. Ishrat Hussain to come and take his chair on the stage, please. Our second panelist today is connected online, Dr. Caroline Sereno. She is the Associate Professor in France. Dr. Caroline is an Associate Professor at Aix-Marseille University School of Management. She's a member of OB Department, and her research encompasses and focus on human and managerial behavior in organization. Please give a big round of applause to Dr. Caroline.
Thank you.
Now, I would request to invite Dr. Mohammad Attar Siddiqui, Dean of Faculty of Management Sciences at UCP, Punjab. Prior to the joining, Dr. Siddiqui served at the KSBL and LUMS Lahore. Dr. Siddiqui is a renowned public speaker, and alongside, he has run leadership team and the building programs for big corporations of Pakistan such as Fatma Groups, K Electrics, Indus Motors, and many others.
The next panelist is my most favorite and my friend, professor from LUMS, Dr. Syed Jawad, to come and take his seat on the stage. A big round of applause, please. Our last panelist is Professor Elena. She'll be joining in a minute, but we can start the panel discussion. Oh, she's here. Dr. Elena, please join us. Over to you, Zotab.
Alaikum, thank you for the introductions. I think after the first two keynotes, this is a very appropriate panel because we can now build on some of the themes and get into some of the specifics. So there are a number of questions that we'll be addressing. So I'm going to be requesting the panelists to give their comments, and we will have about 75 minutes for this discussion. We'll try to stay focused. So the first question which I would like to pose to our panelists is basically, because we are talking about beyond survival, the role of business education in business resilience and innovation. So we may want to start by getting an understanding of what do we mean by resilience and innovation in our own context, and why and how important is resilience and innovation for businesses in today's world, given the context which Dr. Ishrat set up and given the specific information about the Pakistani economy that Dr. Nadeem provided us. What would be the importance of these two things, and what factors are responsible for the increased need for resilience and innovation in today's era, and specifically not only in Pakistan but across the world. But I think we'll try to focus more on Pakistan. So I would like the panelists to volunteer, otherwise I'll make a roll call. Who would like to start? Maybe
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Dr. Zahoor, for this cold call. My 2 cents on this topic, and specifically with respect to resilience and innovation, would be the way I look at it. I would see resilience as more reactive and innovation as more proactive, or at least that's what my understanding is. So resilience is more a response to a crisis, a challenge, a deficit, a setback, and where we as business schools, we as businesses, we as leaders of business schools and businesses, our societies, we have to be resilient. For example, we have to be resilient in terms of our commitment to certain values, our commitment to certain skills, our commitment to certain goals, notwithstanding the deficits, notwithstanding the challenges that we have faced or we face currently. Innovation is something which is more risk-taking. Innovation is something where we are trying to explore new territories, explore new horizons, create new value for our students, new value for our faculty members, new value for our society, organizations, businesses, and so on and so forth. I have further reflections on this, that on the topic of resilience and innovation in the context of Pakistan, but I will come back to this a bit later.
Thank you, Jawad Sahab, for the opening bit. I would just want to put a little bit on what Dr. Jawad Sahab has said. Resilience, it is important to define what resilience is. And resilience typically in the business education or management context means, I'm not sure if it is entirely reactive, but what it means is that can you withstand in the time of difficulty? And you know, in sports, we relate it to the mental toughness. But we're also, the businesses are beginning to realize that resilience is not just an attitude, but there is also a skill or a competency that defines resilience. So, for example, does our system have robustness enough to bear with the exogenous shocks that a business faces or the business education faces or crisis faces? But if you couple the innovation with it, there is a possibility of two different trade-offs that are, so there is a view in management and scholarship that are resilience and innovation complementary, or are they actually, there is a, you know, little bit trade-off between the two things. So when we think about innovation, we are talking about disruption or doing something at a faster pace or with an agile mindset. And that necessarily means taking risk or doing something that would cash on the opportunity that is out there. But the decision it may or may not be resilient in the long term. So for example, you might end up doing things which are brilliant ideas, just like we are seeing with now the crash down of the startup culture, that they were fantastic, it was very fashionable, that we are taking risks, we are doing things that business schools have not taught us. But now we are getting to know that there wasn't enough resilience because they were breaching some value systems or bleeding the money or burning the cash. So I think it is an important puzzle. How do we see resilience as a part of innovation, or can we build a resilience in a way that will innovate but is also durable?
Well, I think those two concepts are related. For example, if you are used to a certain pattern of natural or man-made shocks, then you should be able to develop the capacity through innovation to withstand those shocks. And there are anticipated shocks coming from the pattern of the past, and you can learn from that and you can prepare for it. More difficult is a situation where these are unanticipated shocks, and also they are exogenous, which are not susceptible to your policy interventions. There, the innovation is post-fact rather than pre-fact. And there is the difficulty which the countries, the business is face. Now we can prepare our students in the business education for the anticipated shocks and have them to innovate in order to face those. But the second attribute for the unanticipated shocks is that they should be adaptable to the changed circumstances and try to create the solutions to those problems within a particular specified time to minimize the damage and the loss. So it's a damage control rather than a resilience. And that is where I would draw the distinction.
No, given, again, just building on given the current situation, and I think what has been shared in terms of the challenges that we have, it will be clear that they need to be very resilient because there are a lot of difficulties that they have to overcome. And one, we have had many shocks, many difficulties, and the businesses have to adjust to that and be able to sustain themselves and survive. There's no shortage of difficulties. But that also provides huge opportunities for innovation. So I would like to take this thing to the next level, discussion to the next level. What are those factors that could actually enhance the resilience of business organizations? We're not talking about business organizations, and create the ability to innovate. What are those things specifically in the context of Pakistan? I'll come to you for the business school question, but I'd like to go back to my earlier colleagues with their own extensive engagement and understanding of business. What are those factors which are currently driving the challenges in this area, so that we could identify those factors and then maybe come up with some approach. I mean, some have been mentioned earlier, but besides that, can you think of any? I mean, we have mentioned of fiscal issues, policy issues, maybe skills issues. So those we have already talked about. Anything else which comes here?
Okay, I would want to answer this question very specifically in terms of my experiences with executive education with large utility companies and oil and gas companies and hospitals over last 10 years, mainly in Karachi when I was with KSBL, and also recently with some retail sectors in Lahore. One of the thing in innovation is the collaborative mindset. We're talking a little bit about the softer side now. We talked about the economic issues. And within collaborative mindsets, there is a lot of focus on building culture, leadership. But one pain point that I come across with executives is the concept of psychological safety. That is, can they take risks without the apprehension that they would be penalized for that? And I think that is where the core of the resilience innovation nexus joins. So I built up the scale that has been used by Google to assess the psychological safety in the workplace. So that simply means if I'm in a team and Dr. Ishrat is my boss, can I disagree with him or question his ideas without worrying that he's going to chop my head? And that means, am I willing to contribute to the new ideas in my team meetings and in my collaborative practices? And the psychological safety scores in Pakistani organizations have been very low. And I did a leadership program of building high performance team, about 12 or 15 cohorts over 1.5 years. And every time we would do the team assessments, the score of the ability to risk my ideas at the cost of reward or penalize, the scores would be very low. So I think that is one, in our cultural context, the psychological safety or the collaborative mindset, I think that is one that needs to be explored more.
I'd like to go to our panelist who is sort of online. Your comments on what we have been discussing so far.
Thank you very much. Yes, I see here there are it's a very interesting discussion, this link between resilience and innovation. And building on the idea of resilience, you know that resilience is originally part of physical characteristics of materials, and it has been further developed in psychology. How can one person, one individual become resilient to very harsh chapters of one's life, which means that you want to go from survival only to revival kind of thing. So having, again, a good life. And in organizational settings, that's also the same idea. It's how can we, when we are facing an external shock that was not anticipated or could not be anticipated, how can a company survive, but not only survive, also rebuild a new life? And here is where psychological safety is a key word when it comes to individual ideas inside the company, into among employees. And on top of this, I would add the idea that the organization should have a growth mindset based on learning, capacity to learn from the situations. Because I have been observing companies that at least praise for collaborative practices, but at the end of the day, do not apply new ideas, do not change their way of doing things. They always have a reason why they would say this idea is interesting, but here it doesn't fit, or we already tried 20 years ago, it didn't work, or this is requests too many resources. So it's a kind of resistance to new ideas despite collaborative practices. And this is why companies should really, through their governance, learn to be a learning organizations, meaning with trying is key in innovation and resilience. It is true for individual level, it is true for organizational level. And I would say that, and I will further develop that, it's also related from my perspective, to really having a more ESG perspective. So companies, there is some papers that have shown that companies who have engaged in environmental, social, and governance development and approach have a higher level of resilience because they discuss more, they engage more their own communities. They engage more, for instance, their suppliers, not only their customers and their employees, but also suppliers, also communities, also policymakers, in order to understand the environment and find new solutions to crisis in a faster and more resilient way.
Comments. I think we'll move on to the next question. So given this understanding of what is needed to enhance resilience and innovation, the natural next question is, how can business schools contribute in this process? Because we are supposed to be there to provide support and resources for the business. So I'd like to start with Caroline. How would you respond to this question? How can business schools help organizations become more resilient and innovative? One thing we all know that we want to develop individuals who can be resilient and innovative. So I would like you to talk about issues or things which could be done besides developing those individuals. What else can business schools do to help organizations become resilient and innovative?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Zaur Hassan, for your question. It's a pleasure to be here in this discussion panel. Okay, so I think business schools are the most important pillar in this question because they are forming the next leaders and the next entrepreneurs. So there is a question here that it was not brought yet about the risk takers, to be a risk taker. We have this problem in Portugal. I'm going to give you my example. People, there is a tradition to have a salary. There is a tradition to have a salary from the government. A long tradition about that. Okay, and to take something safe instead to risk and to go behind what you have. So I believe that the most important thing is not only to talk about resilience and innovation, is to talk about how are you available, are you capable of taking the risk. And I believe the universities must be a source of openness. The first thing of education is to be a source of openness and to tell people that you must take the risk if you want more. This is the first lesson that business schools must have to their students. I don't know if I answered your answer.
For sure.
Because I can detail certain factors.
So you need to make sure that people who go through the business education, go back with a positive attitude, right? So they are more hopeful, they are more positive, and they are willing to do new things. Okay, so we'll build on that. Any thoughts on the second question?
Thank you. One thing, Professor Zahoor, which at least I have noticed in the Pakistani context is this, that there is at least some emphasis or some superficial emphasis on development of skills and development of competence and development of leaders. But where I see a major deficit across universities and across business schools, that we are not focused on development of values-driven leaders. So if I were to identify two purposes of a university or two purposes of a business school or any other school, those two purposes would be: one, development of skills and competence. So that would be the first purpose: development of skills, professional competence, vocation, and so on and so forth. But the second element, which is often ignored, is development of values and development of ethics. So, for example, Dr. Ishrat in his speech, he did identify that Pakistan currently faces a major issue of polarization. Call it political polarization. I would say that I would not remain confined to this. Religious polarization, sect-based polarization, ethnicity-based polarization, socioeconomic status-based polarization. And unless we as universities, unless we as business schools acknowledge this, that this is a major issue, and this major issue needs to be addressed through our, for example, through our curricula, through our pedagogy, through our various education and executive education programs, which have to be measured. And the performance or the lack of performance of our leaders, it all on an annual basis has to be evaluated based on those parameters. I think these are the important things to do. Allama Iqbal, our national poet, he says that na ho tabiyat hi jinki qabil, wo tarbiyat se nahi savarte. So it's not just a matter of tarbiyat, it's also tabiyat. It's not. Thank you, that's really reassuring. So it's not just a matter of professional competence. It's a matter of where I lack in my own personal character, and that's why I have not been able to train my own students. That look, in addition to professional competence, we need people who are values driven.
I just wanted to respond to the risk taking. When we started the entrepreneurship course, we carried out a survey of the BBA students, and it conformed to the empirical studies which show a normal distribution, which is at the tail end, you have only 10 to 15% who are really risk takers. And 85 to 90% are either risk neutral or risk averse. So you have to actually convince those at the tail who are risk takers to come and join the entrepreneurship course, which is high risk taking, because everybody wants a secure job, 9 to 5 with the salaries and others. So we have a very small proportion of the business school students who are really going to take that risk. And how to convince them and how to bring them to improve the capacity of the business organizations to be innovative and resilient is the challenge for our business schools. And I think this is a small proportion. It's not a large proportion. And therefore, the challenge is that how do you transform them into useful professionals who can really take those concepts in practice when they join the business organizations.
Dr. Carolina, your thoughts on this?
Sure. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting discussion. Thank you very much. I think business schools need, on top of what has been already said, my take on this is at several levels. The first one, I think that professors should be open to continuous learning themselves. And not only about their topic, as they usually do with their research, but also about other topics, because we have a highly specialized professorship in business schools. And what we see in the reality is that organizations face complexity, organizations face situations where they cannot have only a strategic answer or a financial answer or a marketing answer. And my observation in business schools is that professors are not always open to kind of discuss in the program boards where I sit, for instance, in order to discuss and make sure that all the courses have a red thread so that the message to students is consistent. We are putting some emphasis now in sustainability, for instance. So we put courses on sustainability. We put courses on business ethics. It has been mentioned on business ethics so much. We put emphasis on entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is also a big deal. And I agree, not everyone is open to taking risks. And by the way, entrepreneurs do not take stupid risks indeed. What it characterizes an entrepreneurial mindset is more that they can deal with it. They accept risk. They still sleep at night, even if they are facing high risks. It's not that they are somehow irresponsible. And so entrepreneurship, but it's also very important to know what entrepreneurship is, because even in a big company, having an entrepreneurial mindset will make a difference into that agility and that innovation we were talking about. And what my observation is that professors should be more open to think about their own capacity to teach these things into their areas. We need business ethics in finance courses. We need business ethics in marketing courses. We need business ethics in strategic courses. We need sustainability in finance courses. We need sustainability in marketing courses. We need sustainability in strategic courses. And definitely leadership is related to values. And I think there's a big emphasis on values now with all this sustainability approach. And those values are the respect to nature and the respect to society, which is already a lot, and more talked than really done. And business schools are not very good at being consistent in those messages. I see some students telling us that depending on the courses where they are in, some of us teach them a very highly shareholder perspective only, still today. And those professors are not necessarily old, they can be young, and we all know it's not a matter of only of age, but they are not updating their own mindset. And so we see that this has an impact on students if professors don't make this effort to update themselves and accept the world as it is evolving, We need to make sure that our younger students still want to work in the current world. And we see that they resist more and more to the traditional approaches of organizations. And one of the things it's important here to explain to executives when we have executive education is the importance to move on in order to attract young people to enter our organizations. We need those young people, and those young people do not make many trade-offs any longer if you are not showing deep values of ESG in your organizations. And business schools are not always very consistent with that.
Thank you.
First, I would want to just reinforce the entrepreneurial mindset, because I think that when we critique too much on this 9 to 5 jobs, sometimes I feel that we are leaning on to extremes. As Dr. Nadeem's presentation showed, the industry's productivity is also kind of stagnant. So they also need intellectual talent. So when we go and say that everybody has to be an entrepreneur and break yourself from the shackles of 9 to 5, sometimes I feel we are going over the board, because when they become entrepreneur, they're also going to hire somebody to work 9 to 5. So I think, that's entrepreneurial mindset versus the entrepreneur, and that's, I think, the tied to the resilience. What I was going to say though was also that risk taking is also a tabiyat. Taking inspiration from Iqbal. Some people just do not have the tabiyat. That doesn't necessarily make them inferior students. So, people need to excel where they can. But going back to the examples of resilience and businesses, schools, and what we do and what we don't do, this may not go down well, but I do feel, because COVID-19 in history is a reference point for resilience. And when universities went virtual or online, and when we returned back to campuses, I feel that the students have showed more resilience than the faculty. So when people were virtual, the students took the opportunity, I'm not saying all, but as a comparison, they built more newer skills than the providers of education did. And we did not move too much beyond just managing the Zoom and MS Teams, but they utilized their teams to build a parallel source of income in gig economy. So they came back with freelancing, they came back with doing things on Fiverr, they become influencers, whether we like or don't like their taste, but they did something where they could show more resilience and stay in an income class to support their education. They learned skills like drop shipping, they became Amazon sellers. And now what I see, especially at UCP, that we have very different undergrad class dynamics. And in a lot of sense, they do know a little bit more or different than what faculty knows. And that is where the frustration of the teacher is, that why is he or she not taking interest in the case study I am teaching? But because they do not relate themselves with that kind of future. And I think they have shown more resilience or skill reorientation than we have done. And I think there is much on our part that is desired to offer what is going to be a revivalist and interesting for them. And one of the things that Dr. Ishtar Saab said is exactly got to do how we evaluate and measure these students. Because we make it so boring for them with 40% final and 30% midterm, that the experimental things that they've learned in the window they were away from campuses, they're not able to experiment and apply them in the universities.
Okay. So that's a good link to the next question which I'm going to ask. But just to summarize, I think we had a very rich discussion. I think what I am taking away from this interaction is that before you can think about contributing to the resilience and innovativeness of organizations, business schools themselves have to be resilient and innovative, number one. And the starting point has to be second. On entrepreneurship, I'd just like to add one bit. I've always believed that it is not about entrepreneurship. It is about the spirit of enterprise. That you are going to create new things, you're going to do new things that could be within the same organization, that could be with yourself. You don't need to be working for anyone. You could be, and the faculty has to be the role. If the faculty is doing the same thing that they have been doing for the last 10 years, you can't expect the students to pick up the entrepreneurial skills in the entrepreneurship course. So I think the spirit of enterprise has to show up within the business school at each individual level in our processes, the way we grade, the way we structure things. So I'm going to now move on to the next question, and this will be sort of building on the last comment which Dr. Athar made. Now, in this whole situation, let's try to identify some concrete steps which the business schools can take to actually play there. What would be those 2 or 3 things that you would like business schools to actually do differently or to build upon? And again, I'll start.
Thank you. Well, departing from your last idea of taking, there is a need to have a sense of enterprise. That is the first, I believe, that is the part of the university. Because if you offer a platform, okay, you have to teach the future leaders to have management, how to do a business plan, and that kind of stuff is difficult for a student and to have a self-reflection. Okay? So one thing is to have this talk, another thing is to put it in practice. Make it an innovation, create value for the society. But you need the means to create that value. So I think the business schools, and I bring this example, of course, my university is very focused on technology and entrepreneurship, but it's not the only example we need. But I believe this is very important, this kind of service, and how students have the ability to set their own ideas and to set their own business. So that's what enterprise.
Okay, okay, fine. We'll get on this, but again, I would like the panelists to comment on this idea. Does the faculty member also have to depict and his commitment to taking risk and to be full of enterprise? Because if the faculty member that is planning
is not depicting some of those values, are you then going to limit this?
just one course of entrepreneurship, most people will take maybe reluctantly because they have no idea of their own business. The role of the faculty. Can you comment?
Okay? You can have the best textbooks, the best, but you need an attitude and a proactive attitude for making, for as I said before, you manage the center of focus. And that attitude to, for instance, you can use you have usually elements of okay? Why not to transport? In my class, why not to transform one final project? Why not to put people together, working on something that can have in the life of the day, one day. But as I told you, this is very important because if you don't have the platform, if you don't have help, and you also feel help, because okay, I don't. You need also the capital and so on, but if you don't have the capital, that
Providing that enablement,
you cannot.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody like to take?
I just wanted to answer your question by saying the faculty member is not taking autonomous decision, which is influenced by the incentive structure of risk and rewards. So if your criteria for the career progression of that individual are very much cast in stone, that this is what you have to do, I don't think you should expect them to deviate from that, because that is what their butter and bread is about. So unless you link it up to the incentive structure, where I said they should be able to carry out innovation, experimentation, new university is the user of new ideas and new thought processes. That's not what is happening. They have become conformist, and for innovation, you have to be non-conformist. You are challenging the existing paradigm, and you are trying to replace that by a new paradigm. So you have to link it with the incentive structure. And ours is frozen in time. I think since 1925 or 30, and there hasn't been any progress. So you cannot have two schemes, one for the faculty member and one for the accreditation and AGC, because the faculty member will fall by the wayside.
Maybe,
Yeah.
Dr. Carolina to comment on that. Yes, please.
Okay, so then I'll be fast. Thank you again. My take on this and building on what colleagues have said, I don't fully agree with what has been said. I think that if a professor is not partially or totally intrinsically motivated, we do have a problem, because this should be one of the reasons why one would want to be a professor. If you want to earn a lot of rewards, get a lot of rewards or income, then you go into entrepreneurship, for instance. So this is why I think you're not fully externally kind of impacted in the way you teach. You really have to have your own intrinsic values there. That's one point from my perspective, of course. The second one is that I don't think that a professor's job is to be a model of what he or she teaches at all. I think that a professor has to be aware of what he or she is teaching and bring people into the classroom who represent that model, like a very good entrepreneur, like a very good leader, etc. A professor has to be good in pedagogy, in being able to make the students learn. And so this is why sometimes I see professors who are excelling into content, but not excelling in the way they create the courses. And by the way, this is in general not very valued in business schools when we come back to the reward system. And so self-awareness for professors is absolutely key. I am able to tell to my students who I teach leadership, I am not a good leader myself, okay? But I can be a very good leadership professor for you. And I will show you with the whole class design that I have done and so on and so forth. So I don't see students need to see that a professor has an entrepreneurial mindset to learn entrepreneurship. No, but the class setting, the design has to bring in people who will show entrepreneurial mindset concretely and to give tips. And as you said, having technology or a setting where students can practice. That's my perspective.
Just to add, I did not mean that the person has to be an entrepreneur faculty, but when you bring in different people, get out of your comfort zone, by start leveraging, you are indicating one characteristic.
Are actually trying to accomplish something beyond your own capability. That's one thing which an entrepreneur does. Yes.
Yeah. I would like to add something following what Karina said, because I think it's important. The question of failure. For instance, I'm in a society where failure is a shame. It is another thing that you have to need to learn to teach to students. So, they have to fail. They want to try something. Very well. Shame is a problem sometimes. It's a barrier. Okay? And I tell you a story. And he told me, but let me tell you when I was 5. I want to give you the example when I was 5. He was a student in the United States, and then I studied there. And I felt that the failing point is not so complicated. It's very accepted. And he said to us, okay, let's go to this class when I lost fight. Okay, because if you I lost fight somewhere in time, then he said I know more than the people that never tried. So this is something that you need to teach the students. You have to accept.
So my follow-up question to this. Then where do business schools need to change? What do we need to look for when we are, if we are saying that, okay, we want to promote non-conformity, looking for that. should be looking for people who have taken some risk. Our current systems don't actually accommodate it. We are looking at location, we are looking at. But if a person
Has never taken a risk, never shown an inclination to get out of the comfort zone.
address this issue, because at the end of the day, it is the faculty who is going to make things happen.
I think back in 2000 or 2001, there was a Hollywood movie, and its title was What Women Want. Now, how do I connect this with this panel? That's an important challenge. I think that the way we write a journal paper, the way we write a strategic plan, we start with a gap. We start with the identification of the gap. Where exactly is the gap? What exactly is the need? I think that the business schools and the universities and the leaders of institutions, they really need to identify what the businesses want. And not only what do they want, what do they need? Number one. Number two, what does the Pakistani society want? And number two, what does the Pakistani society need? I think this is important for us to identify. This has to be settled. It has not been settled as yet. According to Bhagat, चलता हूँ थोड़ी दूर हर एक राहरों के साथ पहचानता नहीं हूँ अभी राहबर को मैं. We are just following shadows. We are following the Harvard model. We are now following the NLAC model. We are following the ASSP model. What exactly does the Pakistani context mean? What exactly do the Pakistani organizations mean? Once these questions are settled, then I think it is important. It would be relatively easy for us to identify what kind of members we need.
So the first thing then would be for those associated with the business schools to start spending serious time outside the business.
The more a person like me spends time in my office, in my cozy office, the more I'm doing injustice to my employer, which is the business school, and the more I'm doing injustice to the society and the businesses which I'm supposed to serve.
So I think this academic priorities have to be adjusted to the local realities, and for that we need to understand the local realities. Okay, what would be ways in which we could encourage this? Now I want to better. How do we now take these steps so that this starts happening? I'm going to keep shifting, and then I'll go further. Maybe they are doing something interesting because I want to look at some examples of how business schools may have already started.
Taking inspiration from Dr. Jawad Sam, कल से मैं आपको office में नजर नहीं आऊँ. I think I want to go a little bit back to what Dr. Bishop Sam said and what Kevin related. I think it's not about not having vision. It's about, I think, what Dr. wanted to say, that if your extrinsic structure of motivation is so rigid that is eventually going to deplete your intrinsic motivation. And I think it is a very important point to address for all business schools, and whether the hurdle is caused by NBAC or HEC or whoever. If the business schools, I think we all know what local realities are and what we need to do. At the same time, we cannot ignore the reference points of ASDS, we are Warwick or Harvard, because we do learn from somebody who is better than us. But that's obvious. So we cannot say that we start mediocre because we want to be our own self, so we remain at a lower level. If we want to take an inspiration, we take inspiration who is definitely better than you. But I think what is very important is that the flexibility is the keyword. And if there are not multiple pathways available for faculty to develop, we'll be having the same problem again. So I think when I was at LUMS, there were multiple pathways. You could be on practitioner track, you could be on teacher track, you could be on research track. And it is not about the non-value of journal articles, it is about the mushrooming of the low-quality journal articles. That is a trap, which is making the good research look bad too. So I think that's what we want to avoid. But if there are not multiple pathways that are going to support the creative vision, the enterprising vision of the organization, we are not going to get out of it. I think that's for me is very important. And it's a structural problem. The way the business schools are structured, that you know you have to spend certain amount of time in an A position before you can go into a B position. If there are not multiple tracks available where people can pursue what they are passionate about, I don't think we are going to see much creative and intellectual spaces.
Dr. Shah, you want to add on? I think what you really need is to reshape the wardrobe of your. I mean, both you and is exposed to the consultancy for the corporate sector is the part of the learning process by the faculty who come and disseminate that these are good practices, these are the bad practices, and this is what you should avoid, what you should not avoid, and your training there. Open up consultancy to the faculty members, allow them a large chunk of the proceeds to be preempted by them, and 1/4 should go to the university for the overhead expenses. Allow them to start their own companies, and they can use their students also as a part of the learning process. If you do that, then the problem that you have your finger in the pie, you know what the corporate sector's needs are, and you are actually preparing your students. So it's a two-way street. You're helping the corporate,
and you're helping the business schools. This dynamic interaction between the faculty and the corporate sector, to me, will bring about the changes we are talking about.
Dr. Carolina, your thoughts on this?
Thank you so much. I think we have here also to look at things at two levels. One is the organizational level, what the business schools rules, norms, regulations, what they value, how to modify that so that we are more consistent with what we want to have, what we want to do, our mission. Because currently, my observation is that we have been all trapped into the Shanghai ranking expectation and requirements. And since this was created from scratch, for some reason, France, for instance, was a country that was very much resisting to it. It's no longer resisting to it at all, because it has been so much embedded into this ranking of universities based exclusively on English written publications, has done that today anything else you do in your business school, even if it's absolutely necessary for the community, for the students, and for the future of the world, is not valued. So here we have a challenge, I don't know at what level, but a very high one. One could be to be a bit rebellious towards that at the business school level. I would have expected the EFMD to be a bit rebellious towards that. Okay, that's one point. When it comes to the faculty member level, I think it's so difficult. Some of us, we do consulting. It's, for instance, also a little bit my case, some of us. But in general, the motivation for a faculty to become a faculty is because you are a reflector, you are a theorist, you are attracted by this type of cognitive motivation. And it's so different from what entrepreneurship or even strategic or operational consulting can be. I would say that my observation is that in our master of research teaching and in our doctoral programs, we should do what we do in our professional masters. We should oblige the students to work in teams, because faculty are not accustomed to work properly in teams, sometimes for publications, but that's all. We should make in the doctoral program something more hands-on so that students must go and see companies, because the doctoral programs are creating the future teachers, the future professors. And if you don't do it during the doctoral program, it's very difficult to do it afterwards. And I've been myself trying to influence doctoral programs, and I see how difficult and how much resistance there is into doing that. Even courses on how to teach properly are not part of most of the doctoral programs. And so I would, for instance, I would invite or I would hire, if I was a dean, hire professors who have done an MBA on top of a doctorate or a PhD. Because when you do an MBA, a full year MBA, in whatever country, not necessarily in a Western country, you are somehow obliged to you have some theory, but you also are obliged to be hands-on, to create a venture, even if it's not a real venture afterwards. You will have to cooperate with other people, you will have to co-decide, you will have to conduct a consulting mission, you have to go to make interviews for corporate purpose issues and so on. And that would be a good way, I see. We are for instance, in my school, we are 2 or 3 of us who have done an MBA, and systematically we are those who have good ratings in executive education. And I think executive education is where you can have a little bit of influence on society or on business at the short term.
Thank you. I'd just like to add to that my own experience of over 35 years of recruiting faculty and dealing with faculty. Those individuals who come with some industry experience are much more inclined to do things that we have been talking about. So I think those who are coming in with a purely theoretical background, I think we need to give them an opportunity to actually get immersed in industry in some form, maybe through an MBA, through some internship. Ideas that we have been sort of talking about, giving them some time. Dr.
I just wanted to add, because you talked about the examples, UCP has a faculty internship program as well. So we have, just like we have students going for internships, we also have faculty industry placement, FIP. So they go for 15 days.
And now I think I would like, we have still one more question to go, but I'd like to encourage the audience to write down any questions or queries that they have and pass it on to, I think we have some people helping us. Just hold on, please. Write it down, and if you want to pose that question to any of the specific panelists, do write that down. I don't want people to asking the question because that will take up a lot of time. I want you to write your question on a piece of paper. We can provide that piece of paper and pass it on so that we'll take those questions together. Please, while we move on to the last question that I have, we will take those questions, and then maybe at the end, if we have time, we'll give people the time to ask the question. So please, I'll encourage especially the students and of course the faculty to actually come up with a question. Otherwise, I'll start making cold calls, asking people to ask a question. Okay, the next question is, and this is in a way summing up the whole. One of the problems which, one of the issues, I did some work related to entrepreneurship way back, and I was visiting a very leading, one of the top universities in UK. And I met the head of the entrepreneurship center. This was the time when entrepreneurship or incubation centers were not being set up in Pakistan. So I asked him, how do you work and where do ideas for new enterprises? So, and of course he knew that my association with the business school. He said, if you are thinking about business school people coming up with really risk-based, innovative ideas, forget it. At my university, most of the new ideas come from either sciences or engineering disciplines. The business graduates tack on with those teams because the business aspect is needed. But business people generally, especially those who have invested a lot of time and money in getting an MBA, are primarily looking at getting a good return. This was about 20 years back. Things have probably changed. So what is your view, I'll ask this panelist, does this thing still hold? That the business school graduates are more risk averse as compared to the graduates of the sciences or especially the engineering schools. Because if you look at the great developments which have taken place, especially technology related, they have not come from the business school. Business school people have been responding and reacting to what has already happened. So your take on this?
Well, let me give you the example of University of Kentucky. I went to visit their Center for Entrepreneurship, and one was a biochemical engineer, next to him was an economist, the third one was a physicist, fourth one was a business. I said, why are these people sitting together? They say problem solving is a holistic approach. It is not a monodiscipline which really creates the solutions. The informal interaction between these individuals gives us an enriched insight into what the nature of the problem is and how to go about this. And we form multidisciplinary teams which work on these problems as far as the entrepreneurs are concerned. So I personally think that you are right, that we must not confine ourselves into the silos, because I argue that anthropological insights, sociological insights, political science insights are equally important in resolving some of the business problems as the business schools can do. So it's a multidisciplinary approach which I think would find solutions to the problem.
And how well are we addressing this approach currently in our academic system? So not at all. Any other comments? Dr. Ishad. Can you keep it close to you?
Management. And I'm thinking about my students in my PhD, which is so I have physicians, PhD in marketing and strategy. I have people from engineering. My background is mathematics as well, and I'm so that is a way to precisely to bring together different fields and disciplines. So I believe that the PhD is not only for teaching, okay, and there is another issue that I find in the Portuguese society. I'm talking about what I know better, of course, and I don't know always in favor. It's the integration of PhD people in the industry. That is another issue that we have. We have, of course, now that we have the theses that are developed in the connection with the industry, and the student can be settled in the industry performing the business. But there is another problem also, to accept the preconcept of accept people from the university to solve the real problems in the company. In certain areas, in certain fields or economic activities, that is accepted. But in others, no. And that is a problem. For instance, in consulting, that I believe it was in consulting field, the PhD people would be very useful. So why not bring them together? So it is completely different, for instance, what happens in where people in consulting.
Any other thoughts? You may want to start with the I wanted to now have to make increasing number of students program. They come from Gen Z. Yeah. Generation Z in general, they are not risk averse. They take huge risks. They are very short-term oriented. They have very short concentration of time span, and they don't listen to me, which is a major risk in the classroom. But I'm not really worried about whether they are risk averse or not. It is their perception of what they perceive as risk. That I think is more important. Because their perception of risk is a reflection of my perception of risk. My perception of risk, my colleagues' perception of risk is predominantly bottom line only, economic risk only. They do not understand that there is also a huge amount of risk which is connected with people and planet. They do not perceive it as which I think that. So this is something which is not just at the level of students, but also at the level of instructors in the school. Which has a dimensional aspect of the risk.
I just wanted to answer a question. I think situation has changed. I do think that, it will not be appropriate to make a qualified answer there because we do not have the numbers. We do not have the statistics. But I think in last 10 years, business school graduates are producing more entrepreneurs. Whether it is more than engineering or less, that I don't know. But even if you take one example, you can think of Sunil Manj, you can think of IRCDB of KSPL, you can think of the guy who did food pandas after graduate. So I think that trend is going upwards. And I don't think that's the case that only non-business schools are doing the startup or the businesses. The idea of the policy, that's where I think the new undergrad policy that HEC has brought in, that requires all undergrad students to study the general education courses for first 2 years. So that includes sociology, that includes quantitative reasoning, that includes psychology, a course in language, a course in foreign language. But I don't think that is going to get integrated and converge into something.
I'll go to Dr. Carolina, but I just want to add a bit to this question. We all talk about the significance and importance of business school. Have we developed a real measure to assess the impact that we are creating? I mean, we know that there are publications that we look at. We look at the salary numbers, how soon people get a job. Think about the measures so that we can see that okay, how brilliant and innovative individuals are in skill sense. I think number of startups that are being set up by a graduate maybe one measure, but I don't think it's a real measure because not everybody will start. Can we have some comments on this before I take up these two questions which have come from the audience? Any thoughts on this? Maybe I'll start with Dr. Carolina. Any thoughts on this? How can we come up with some way of assessing?
Very fast here because it's important to listen to the questions from the audience, as you said. There is an approach now that has been developed. Well, it's by EFMD, originally developed in France, called BSIS. Maybe you know that. I don't remember what those letters stand for, but it's EFMD. No, BSIS. BSIS, it's about calculating the real impact of business schools in their community. So you can have a look to that if you are interested in. I know that my school went through that. We got it. I think it's very imperfect, but as many of these type of approaches at the beginning, there are lots of imperfections, but at least it exists. And for the second one, compared to engineering schools and so on, I think as my other colleagues, I don't know, or at least I don't know about any statistics around that, but my observation with engineering students, which we have many of them in general management programs, is that they come from an environment where they seem to be they seem to have a higher level of humbleness as compared to business school students. And there is an issue, I think, with ego and business school students and business school professors, by the way. And this, what does this mean? It has an impact on society because, as you said earlier, failure can be seen as a shame. We like to somehow show off. So I know that some of us spend a lot of time trying to address this issue with them, and it's not easy at all. We also use models. Very often we use models where themselves they have a big ego when we use those models. And humbleness and humility, even if we talk about it thanks to Jim Collins and whatever it is, but still it's not embedded in the philosophy of business as saying business is a matter of the whole community and not a matter of one egotic person who will be the star. And to me, this hinders the capacity of entrepreneurship, even if we are increasing the amount of courses in entrepreneurship.
Thank you. I think I'll just, there's 2 or 3 questions. One is, two questions are about the same thing, so I'm trying to combine those. There is, I have 5 minutes according to that thing, is to make sure that we are trying to develop entrepreneurship in the business school. But the question is that when you have this requirement to attend a certain percentage of classes and you have to take your midterms and finals, how can you expect students to actually have the time to work on new ideas or entrepreneurship? So that is one question. I think it's probably coming from a student. Any thoughts on this? Maybe we'll start with Dr. Ansar.
I think there is a concept, very well-known concept in the strategic management called decoupling. And you know, just have to do some creative accounting and count the experience as the classroom hours. There is no other way around. Just take them out, do that, count them towards the classroom hours.
Just to give you an idea, at LUMS, we had a lot of debate whether we should require attendance in class, generally at undergraduate level. And after a lot of debate, although in our MBA program, attendance is a must. So it was decided that we will not insist on attendance in the class. We will try to make the class interesting and value-adding to the extent that the student would like to attend the class. You have instruments like quizzes and other things which will encourage people. And again, I think there's still debate whether that we went too far. But as far as the business school undergraduate is concerned, it still requires, I think, through various measures for the people to attend because you need to have certain discipline. So it's, I don't know if there's one answer to this question or not. You need to have a balance. Okay. The second related question is as a faculty member, how do you trigger this entrepreneurial instinct? I mean, anything that you have tried which has worked? So people are looking for some ideas. How do you trigger entrepreneurial mindset as a faculty member? Quick responses. Anybody who's tried something which has worked? I'll give you my own input, but once I've heard others. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Carolina. Tell us that one thing which may help trigger entrepreneurial instinct in students that you have tried and which has worked in your opinion.
We have created 2 things. At the first year of master level, we are doing a weekend, kind of a startup weekend, like the startup weekends which exist at the school level, with like of tutors who are entrepreneurs themselves, most of them alumni, and so happy to come for the weekend. So it's a very agile exercise where students, about 150 students, are put into groups and they have to create an idea. They are tutored and mentored for 2 days and they have to pitch it in front of venture capital.
Dr. Carolina has mentioned this is an international organization which gives you a framework. It does work at LUMS. In the School of Science and Engineering very regularly, doesn't work in the business school at LUMS. It's not required. Do you require it or is it an optional thing for students? Startup.
For the M1 student is required.
Okay, so they have required. It's a great idea. I'll encourage people to look at that. And I think there's support available. Many institutions do this. We do this regularly. But in the School of Science and Engineering, not in the business school. The second question, I don't know. It's a tough one. I can only have quick response to this. Advice for Gen Z PhD students and faculty. What advice would you give to Gen Z PhD students and faculty? Those who are Gen Z and are PhD students and faculty, young faculty basically. Any advice for young faculty? Good advice. Any other advice? Any other advice? Any other advice? Patient. Okay. Yeah. I will just add one bit to that. PhD, and this is something which somebody told me when I was working on my PhD, that forget about focusing on trying to think that you will be solving problems through the PhD. All that you will be learning in the PhD is to define problems and identify that piece of the problem that you learn how to attack. So it is how to attack a problem. So if you're looking at PhD as a way of just publishing and just going on and getting a good job, I think you have lost it before you even started. So focus on what you will acquire. And if you acquire this ability to identify a problem, focus on a problem and come up with a way of addressing that problem, consulting, executive education, teaching, research, everything will come through. So I think this was very good advice given to me, which I think has helped me. Dr. Athan.
This is my general advice to all Gen Zs, which is that not everything that generations before you did was wrong. I think there is just too much that Gen Zs are special. They are very different. They are born in technology. They have higher IQs, tech savviness. But whether you're a PhD student, a faculty, whoever you are, you still need some discipline in life. I think that's very important for Gen Z.
There's one question specifically for Dr. From where this came from. Faculty, and I'll just read it out, it's not very long. Faculty has to be engaged with community projects that are localized and contextualized in nature. Students are doing social entrepreneurship, but faculty remains isolated from community-related social issues. So how can we put it in structure of performance management so that faculty does this? Need Dr. Question is addressed to him, and then I'll come.
I think this is a good suggestion. We haven't thought about it. We introduced the social internship for the students so they can spend some time with the very backward, poor families living in the shanty towns and the, Kachi Abadis. But the idea that we should also get the faculty members involved is a very sound idea. And I think we should think about it. I haven't thought about it. So thank you very much for that suggestion.
Yeah. So you make it, okay. Yeah. And then make sure that one thing that we have at LUMS is that when you fill out your annual form, this is the last comment, when you fill out your annual form, it does ask about the thing that you have done outside the academic area. So you record that. I don't know how it is being used. Dr. Jawad has been a recent dean. What credit do you get? But at least you get an opportunity to talk about your social engagements. So there's a whole section in that form. So at least that's being recorded. I'd like to close this with thanks to my... Oh yeah, please, I thought you didn't turn in your question. Please go ahead. Go ahead, Ji. Is there any mic? Because please provide a mic there. So I thought you had turned it in because I asked everybody to write the question.
Thank you for this opportunity, and sorry, I understand it was a question format. I want to give two comments. One is that we also need to change the culture of panel discussion. You are talking about innovation, and we are following conventional style of conversation, where expertise speak and we receive. So I think, and two comments. One is that I'm a sociology student of sociology, teaching sociology. From a socio-linguistic perspective, I see that higher education is obsessed and get lured by what I call buzzwords in education. So there is risk, there is entrepreneurship, and the professors and universities brochure and everything would run with it without deepening the concept and ethos. I really appreciate there was a talk on value, there was a connection with society, there was a connection with being and the egos. I have just two comments. One is that we need to rethink what is higher in higher education and rethink research. I don't know when the higher education policy was shaping research agenda and research culture, they seem to miss total ground realities. And I think some of you, maybe, I have seen experts coming up again and again talking all these beautiful things. But my humble question is, what you did when you were experts and in the position to shape policy? What was the gap between this and that?
Okay, good. Okay, thank you for those comments. Actually, I was trying to follow a certain format, but again, those comments are very valuable. We could ask the panelists if you have another 15, 20 minutes as to what they have done, because I know at least 3 people who have done a lot in this country to shape things, who are in the panel. And I think what Dr. Carolina was saying, I think she mentioned a lot of things that she has done. So I'd like to conclude this thing with one comment. I have been a panelist and a moderator for many sessions. This has been one of the most educative, insightful panels that I've ever attended. I think I'd like to thank my panelists for their contribution and for the questions, and for the audience for their active engagement through clapping and for raising questions and issues. Because without that, I think some of these people would not have been motivated to contribute the way they contributed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can I ask the guests to wait a minute? We'll be handing over the shields. May I now invite our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Mir Mohammed Shah, and Dean Faculty of Management Science, Professor Dr. Niaz Ahmed Bhutto, to come on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Let us first appreciate the input from Dr. Caroline Serrano, who was connected with us online. A big round of applause for Caroline, please.
Thank you.
Caroline, thank you for joining us. We'll find a way to send the souvenirs and shields to you back in France.
Don't worry.
Thank you for
so
joining.
much.
May
Thank
I
you
now
to
invite
Bul
our
Afshar.
moderator, Professor Dr. Sayyid Zahoor Hassan, to come and receive the shield and the souvenir, please. I'll be calling on the panelists to receive their shields in no particular order. Professor Dr. Ishrat Hussain Saab to come and receive the souvenir. Thank you. May I now request Dr. Muhammad Atta Siddiqui Saab to come and receive the souvenirs, please. May I now invite Dr. Syed Jawad to come and receive the souvenirs, please. And lastly, Professor Dr. Elena Cristina Nobre. She came all the way from Portugal. A big round of applause.
Thank you, sir. So we are reaching the end of the morning session. So take the opportunity to enjoy the well-deserved break, tea break.
All right, we're leaving for tea break now. Let's go for the tea break. Let's be back in 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Caroline, one more time. Bye, ciao.